All right, that was a very short couple minutes for a chat, but hopefully you got to introduce yourself to your neighbor. So it is my great honor to start off this morning welcoming everybody here to ICAO headquarters for the Drone Enable. And to start things off, I'd like to introduce our Secretary General of ICAO, Dr. Fang Liu. Dr. Liu.
Or do you want to speak?
Kind introduction. I'm now addressed to you. First of all, let me welcome you to ICAO to attend this Drone Enabler event. It's a very special event, I should say, and also I think it also attracted lots of industry partners as well as government officials. Again, good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to join you at this inaugural Drone Enabler event, where will be taken some very important first steps on the path toward harmonized UAS traffic management, or UTM. This event will present some of the world's latest ideas on how we can begin to define a pragmatic and aligned regulatory framework for domestic UAS operations, and your insights and perspectives on the eventual path forward will be invaluable to ICAO's work. During the last 3 days, many of you will have participated in our RPAS symposium, which focused on higher end of the UAS family. It addressed the developing regulatory framework for international operations being conducted in accordance with Instrument Flight Rules, IFR. In other words, where unmanned aircraft fully integrate into the traditional manned aviation environment. Today and tomorrow, we will turn our attention to the opposite end of the UAS spectrum, focusing on drones which are very much non-traditional in their characteristics, operations, and flight environments. Like the rest of you, I have noticed the almost regular reports in the media concerning unmanned aircraft, flying taxis, swarms of package delivery drones, and many other types of unmanned craft being used for myriad of recreational, inspection, emergency services, and other uses. Drones are amazingly versatile tools, and they are also aircraft. This helps us to understand the main challenges before us, which will be to collectively explore UTM solutions, which continue to encourage this amazingly innovative development path. But at the same time, we need to determine regulatory approaches which are flexible and adaptive so that all UAS operations can make use of them no matter their state, their industry, or their needs. A key aspect of UTM is the need for it to serve as a type of downsized air traffic management for areas with high-density UAS operations, including package delivery. This could include airspace from ground level to upwards of 2,000 feet, which already takes us into the operational environment of low-flying helicopters. Currently, UTM technology is advancing rapidly in a number of states and regions. This includes the use-based proposals in Europe, NASA's UTM work in the United States, Singapore, Japan, and China in Asia, and the Russian Federation. Excellent work is being done in every case, but at ICAO, our main concern is to ensure global interoperability in areas where there are clear cost, resources, and other efficiencies to be gained from harmonized solutions country to country. With respect to this UTM mandate, more specifically, we recognized almost from the moment our member states requested us to look into new solutions that our traditional paths for developing standards and recommended practices, or SARPs, would be insufficient. We needed to determine a new approach to our work in order to answer the immediate needs of both those governments and many of you here today for common and coherent global framework. This is why we launched a new process last year to address the rapid proliferation of drones. First, we formed our UAS advisory group, which is comprised of UAS regulatory and operational personnel and ATM and related industry technical experts from geographically diverse member states, international organizations, and industry. Through its work, ICAO produced an online toolkit developed to assist the states which have limited or no regulations or guidance material in this area. The toolkit offers not only helpful information and resources, but also serves as a platform for the exchange of global best practices. Based upon their initial success in rolling out the UAS toolkit in a 6-month time frame, we turned to the advisory group again to help lead our UTM harmonization effort. It was agreed that industry needed to play an expanded role in this process, and this realization led to the request for information which has brought you all here today. I have to say that I have been greatly encouraged by the global response we received, as no less than 76 proposals have now been submitted by states, industry, academia, and other members of the UAS community. It was very important that industry and academic initiatives were solicited, as well as the viewpoints from state regulators, in order to ensure that sound and pragmatic technical approach support this eventual framework. ICAO is proud to use its role as the global aviation facilitator, as the states and other interested stakeholders collaborate on conceptualizing a common regulatory framework to support integration of unmanned aircraft into national airspace. Over the next 2 days, you will be exposed to some of the best and brightest in the UTM domain. The ideas you will be evaluating concern not only turnkey UTM solutions, but also during our stream sessions, you'll be learning about what we've identified as the fundamental components of UTM, namely drone registration, identification, and tracking, communication systems, and other aspects relating to geofencing priorities. The presenters you'll hear from were chosen from the 76 submissions received, with the criteria used to select them having included the maturity of the proposal, its suitability for global application, how comprehensively safety concerns and challenges were considered, and supporting infrastructure needed to realize them, including frequency spectrum requirements. ICAO's hope is that this symposium will provide a unique opportunity for states and stakeholders to share their research, best practices, and lessons learned with the global aviation community. The parallel industry exhibit we've organized will also showcase the breadth of existing technologies, research, and development being conducted, as well as commercial and non-commercial activities in this rapidly evolving sector of the aviation industry. And considering the complexities of international aircraft registries, ICAO will also use this forum to announce plans for a global registry platform for drones, RPA, and manned aircraft. If there was one expectation I would communicate to you as you begin this work, it would be to keep your minds as open as possible to how we address this challenge, and to bring to your discussions the same pioneering spirit and thirst for innovation which has already helped to make you all leaders in this field. We welcome you now to participate in the process of developing a common agreement on the framework and the core boundaries of UTM that will facilitate harmonization between UTM systems globally and enable industry, including manufacturers, service providers, and end users, to grow safely and efficiently without disrupting the existing manned aviation system. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, let me please wish you all a very productive and engaging next 2 days here at the Drone in Nebula. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Liu. And next I'd like to introduce, in a moment here, Mr. Stephen Kramer. Steve is the director of the Air Navigation Bureau, so he's overseeing all of this activity that we've undertaken and has been very encouraging of this new and unique approach that we're taking here at ICAO on this. Steve.
Thank you, Leslie. Good morning, everyone. So many of you that you saw me yesterday afternoon. So I'll hope that I'm not a complete repeat for those who were in the RPAS symposium, but it's a real pleasure to welcome you to Drone Enable. And I'd like to first start out by thanking Dr. Liu for her leadership in making this possible. One of the words in her address was pioneer. And I think really she has been the engine behind this pioneering approach to a new way to bring ideas and proposals to ICAO. And I really want to thank Dr. Liu for the leadership that she's shown in that regard, because it is the only way we could have been able to bring this together as rapidly as we did and begin to address this evolving challenge. The ICAO Assembly last year asked ICAO to find solutions for the risks posed by unmanned aircraft in the manned aviation environment, the international manned aviation environment. And as most of you know, most small UAS will not be international operations. So therefore, they do not strictly fall within the ICAO convention or the purview of ICAO. But because the states asked us to evaluate the risk and find ways to see if we can't mitigate that risk without suppressing or smothering the industry, we had to think about a new way of addressing the challenge. So Dr. Liu really took that challenge on from the assembly and asked us to find a way to create a different environment, a different approach that could bring people who are not used to the ICAO method, which sometimes can feel very suppressing, and we're going to try something different. So I'm really glad that you're all here for that. So I'm going to ask our speakers to come to the stage because it's not going to take me very long to do my part. We have a panel of speakers who will address the audience from a variety of perspectives. From my perspective here at ICAO, this is about you. This is about the industry addressing the international regulators, the states, and the folks who you need to engage with to be successful in the industry. So before I get started on that, I'm really just kind of curious in the room here, if I can get a show of hands, people who represent the industry, the small UAS industry, who are interested in how to do that. Okay. And then how many people do I have here who represent states, the regulators? Ooh, they're mean, watch out for them. And then how many people are here from the rest of manned aviation who are really just terrified about the rest of you? Okay, I see the guys from IATA in the back. Perfect. So that really is the state of affairs. I mean, we're in a situation today where we have a lot of people who want to use the airspace over our heads. And that's challenging government because government wants to foster the economic activity that this promises, but they want to do it in a way that doesn't get them voted out of office, frankly, because drones represent they represent a perception of danger to some people, and for other people, they're really exciting. I mean, to see your package coming to the balcony with your pizza is, some people's nirvana, and for your neighbor next door, it's just like their worst nightmare. So a lot of the issues are not traditional aviation issues. Noise and safety we've been dealing with for a long time. But privacy, law enforcement engagement outside of the traditional aviation regulatory framework, those are things that we haven't dealt with before. So all of those issues come together in designing this technology, taking advantage of it in a way that you could produce and distribute globally in a marketplace that is reasonably harmonious. The international aviation took 75 years to get there, and we're still working on it. This industry is less than 5 years old generally, and for most of you, you're looking at evolving the industry probably in an order of magnitude greater over the next 5 years, which means the processes that we use here at ICAO are not fit for purpose in that sense. But there are processes here that are very valuable to you, and they involve going through an iterative process of evaluating a problem, proposing solutions, valuing the risk, and then working through how all of the stakeholders involved can understand their role and integrate it into their daily lives. So that's part of what we're going to try and hear during the symposium. So I think I'm done with my part. There is a little bit of housekeeping I'll do, and then I'm going to start the introductions. All of you who are new to the building, we do have a Wi-Fi here, which is available. You'll be able to find it public at International Civil Aviation. You can log on there. Of course, we'll all need bathroom breaks. I hope we're going to saddle up and be pretty progressive as we go through this, but down the corridor behind the elevators is where you'll find the restrooms. There are emergency exits located on either side of the stage and in the back following the signs. And we'd also like to make sure that most of the smartphones or drones that are in the room will be in silent mode. So with that, we'll get started. And finally, this is an English-only event. I apologize for the Texan. For the international audience, this is very difficult to follow, but some of the other folks in the room who are used to me now have started to be able to interpret it, so you could ask someone next to you. So our first speaker is Mr. Gilberto Lopez Meyer. Gilberto is the Senior Vice President for Safety and Flight Operations at the International Air Transport Association. In other words, Manned International Aviation. Gilberto is prior to his joining IATA in 2015, he was the Director General of the Mexican Civil Aviation Authority for 2 terms. He holds a law degree, and he was the chairman of ICAO's High-Level Safety Conference in 2015. He has logged 8,600 hours as a pilot, flying equipment like Boeing 727, the Fokker 100, Cessna Citations, and he has a valid airline transport pilot license even today. So without further delay, let's get to our speakers. We're going to have a dialogue. They're going to give you some remarks from their perspective, and then we're going to have an interactive dialogue here where we'll be able to entertain questions as well. Gilberto?
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much. And by the way, Texan is difficult for everyone, not only for foreigners. Yeah? Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Firstly, I'd like to thank ICAO for the invitation to speak at this important event. Drone Lab comes at a critical time as industry and aviation are being challenged with the hard questions of what needs to be in place to allow the safe evolution of drone operations. IATA is a member of the ICAO Small UAS Advisory Group, and we consider this an important work area for ICAO, as you have already heard from our Secretary General at the beginning of this meeting. IATA's top priority is safety, and I think we will all agree that this must be the priority as we evolve drone operations. However, we also need to embrace change as new technology and new investment, very important, new investment provides the potential to benefit aviation in general. A primary focus of this event is low altitude. But we should also not forget high altitude operations, as both will have different levels of interaction with manned aviation. Drones have been identified as a disruptive technology, and their proliferation to provide new commercial services and operations will cut across the aviation business. The operation of drones is based more on automatic and autonomous operations, likewise the future UTM system. This is very different from today's traditional tactical air traffic control operations. And so therefore, the UTM environment could be viewed as a developing and proving ground for a completely new way of doing things. It is essential that established aviation current airspace users, we, work closely with new aviation entrants to develop the required operating environment in a different approach that could be used to evolve operations. New entrants are already operating at all altitudes from very low to very high. And as their operations expand, the different worlds of manned and unmanned aviation will converge quickly, and the air traffic management system needs to be able to cope and accommodate. This potential transformation of airspace will touch on a number of areas. UTM will doubtless include evolving technological capabilities, for example, aircraft-to-aircraft communication, exchange of data, and cooperation. This will provide new opportunities for traffic management, separation standards, and airspace planning. Elements of UTM work will transition to manned aviation and could help advance civil aviation air traffic management. Future development of UAS and UTM system could also, as mentioned earlier this week in this same room, could help us drive the safety bar even higher. One very critical factor to support progress in drone operations and UTM is the ease with which technical and performance data can be obtained. It is relatively cheap and quick to operate UAS compared with manned aviation. That means regulatory authorities and relevant partners in the aviation value chain can have quicker access to more operational data to help prove concepts and certify operations. UTM will incentivize new business models among air navigation service providers, ANSPs. And actually, some countries already have very advanced plans in place for UTM working with their existing ANSPs. That said, and just to use it as a good example, the UAS package delivery market development at low altitude is moving very quickly. And considering the pace of potential expansion, many countries may well forego developing a UTM framework through traditional means, preferring instead to leave it to third-party, privatized providers. Why not? The success or otherwise of such an approach will have implications for ANSP business models and airspace users' cost going forward. The US and Europe are actively testing and designing UTM systems. Additionally, work is advancing quickly in Japan and Singapore. So it is clear that UTM capabilities will be implemented incrementally over the next few years. Certain discussions take a holistic approach to future airspace regulation and operational requirements, with UTM assumed to operate in conjunction with civil airspace. Yes. There are those, however, who argue that such integration is unlikely to be necessary, as certain UAS operations are unlikely to share the skies with manned aviation. The suggestion is that a flight plan, predefined corridors, and the bare minimum of regulation will be enough to cope with certain UAS operations. There may be, of course, unexpected consequences for those responsible for managing and overseeing UTM. For future UTM operations, the economic and political context will be completely different than what we have today. Third-party oversight providers in competition would be both possible and practical as well. IATA, our organization, has a positive and inclusive stance on drones. We believe that their operations and UTM are developing new thinking, new ways of doing things. And while safety and efficiency are always the primary concern, the opportunity to reshape the future for all airspace users, manned or unmanned, is readily apparent. So it is essential that we ensure that safe airspace operation and integration occurs where unmanned and manned systems overlap. To do this, we need new concepts of operations capable of accommodating new diverse operations. On that note, I look forward to learning more over the next 2 days from you on at least registration, identification and tracking, communication systems, and geofencing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gilberto. I think from our perspective in the traditional manned environment, one of the things that's exciting to us is all the things we might have an opportunity to learn by interacting with UAS and with some of the other new entrants that are coming into the airspace. So it really is an exciting time for looking for innovations. And representing the industry in that regard, our next speaker is Mr. Wynne. He's the president and CEO of the Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems International, the world's largest nonprofit organization dedicated to the advancement of unmanned systems and robotics. As an influential thought leader in the unmanned aircraft systems industry, Brian is a member of the FAA's Drone Advisory Committee and Unmanned Aircraft Safety Team. He has also served on the FAA's UAS Registration Task Force and Micro UAS Aviation Rulemaking Committee. Prior to joining AUVSI in 2015, he was the president and CEO of the Electric Drive Transportation Association, a trade association promoting battery, hybrid, plug-in hybrid, and fuel cell electric drive technologies and infrastructure. Brian is also an instrument-rated general aviation pilot, and he recently received a commercial pilot certificate and remote pilot license. Brian, the podium is yours.
Thank you, Stephen. Madam Secretary General, thank you for your leadership in bringing us all together today. Leslie, all week you've been at it, and we really appreciate it. Colleagues, great to be with you. I know some of you have joined us for today, but many of you have been here all week, and I think it's been a very robust and very constructive discussion. And I think we've got an even better discussion ahead of us for the next 2 days. So thank you for your participation. ICAO has led the way in ensuring safety of the global airspace system for over 70 years, and it's good to see so many people from across the world come together to work on the culture of safety that we all know is needed in the unmanned systems that we know we've benefited from in manned aviation. And it was precisely for that reason that I went back to school for my manned training, and I'm recently started working on my CFI. So I'm not sure I have the courage to actually teach other people to fly from the right seat, but I thought it was important to actually walk that talk, and I'm trying to do that as best we can, along with many others that have joined the effort on the safety team in the U.S., et cetera. But I think my last time here in this hall was a similarly large gathering during the first Unmanned Systems Symposium, and I think we galvanized a tremendous amount of effort, and it's great to meet back up with colleagues from around the world to find out about the progress that they've been making. AUVSI, and I know some of you are members of my very proud organization, is very pleased to be partnering with ICAO. And we, at the recent Exponential event in 2017, back in May, where we were all speaking Texan, and some of us even bought cowboy boots while we were there, we were pleased to make the announcement for the RFP, the request for information, and it's really great to hear that 78 papers were received. So that goes to show what a deep level of interest there is and the depth of the technical expertise that exists in this community. In the ensuing months, ICAO has gathered those ideas, the best and brightest from governments and industry alike, about how to best implement a global UTM system. These ideas have been extremely helpful in the conversation, and this week's conference will help to further this discussion and move us closer to a truly international framework. As president of AUVSI, I have witnessed firsthand the massive growth of the UAS industry and the impressive technological achievements of the past few years. Thousands of businesses, small and large, around the world are embracing this technology and integrating UAS into their operations. And I think it's very important to keep in view here that it isn't just technology solution providers that are driving this. It's the people that are using this technology that are driving it even faster and pulling it into the mainstream. Today, more than ever, it is clear that we are at the dawn of a new renaissance in aviation and technology, one that requires international collaboration and the support of agencies such as ICAO to reach its full potential. Emerging and rapidly evolving technologies such as UAS often outpace regulations, and governments can be slow to catch up. As you may know, for many years, the United States lagged behind other countries in establishing a regulatory framework for UAS. Yet, thanks to years of continued collaboration between industry and government, There is now a flexible, risk-based approach to regulating UAS in the United States, one that is now held up as a model for others in the world that want to follow it. In August 2016, the Federal Aviation Administration implemented the small UAS rule, which helped to reduce many barriers to civil and commercial operations in the U.S. Among the rule's requirements, UAS must, as you all know, fly below 400 feet, within visual line of sight, and during daylight hours, among other restrictions. However, the small UAS rule also recognized the need to be flexible and establish a waiver process for UAS operators to request permission from the FAA to fly outside the permitted standards if it could be done safely. As of this month, more than 7,900 platforms have been registered for commercial use, and I think more than 600,000 remote pilots have been certificated to fly in the United States. The FAA expects more than 400,000 UAS to be flying for commercial purposes over the next 5 years, a 5-fold increase from today. These operators include oil and gas companies who are able to inspect hard-to-reach offshore oil rigs and flare stacks without shutting down their operations. They include cellular companies that can now inspect towers without putting workers in harm's way, and real estate professionals who can now provide entirely new perspectives to show potential buyers. Increasingly, operators in these industries and many more are testing the limits of what is possible. More than 1,000 operators in 47 states in the U.S. have used the Part 107 rule waiver process to expand the types of UAS operations and in turn broaden the commercial services that they offer. For example, CNN is now able to operate its UAS over crowds of people to capture new perspectives on breaking news, and Intel has dazzled Disney World visitors with a light show that features 300 unmanned aircraft at one time, and they can scale that well beyond 300. Earlier this month, the world witnessed the tremendous potential of the UAS industry in the aftermath of Hurricanes Harvey and Irma. The industry has long known that UAS have tremendous benefits for relief workers and first responders. Following these disasters, people across the globe have seen UAS save time, money, and most importantly, lives. This unprecedented civil and commercial response underscores the need to streamline expanded UAS operations to get people the help they need when they need it most. It's clear that the UAS industry is primed for incredible growth, and it's now more apparent than ever that businesses and civil operators should be able to reap the full benefits of UAS technology without unnecessary hurdles. Industry stakeholders and government must therefore work together on a global level to identify common solutions to the industry's greatest challenges. And I want to be clear about this. This isn't about a race. It's about how do we share that information so that we can all get there and society can benefit around the world together. One of the most pressing challenges is the creation of a UTM system that can work alongside existing manned aircraft traffic management systems. AUVSI has long advocated for the creation of a UTM system in the United States, but this is not just an American issue. It's an international issue. A truly global UTM system will reduce barriers to innovation and improve safety and security for all aircraft, both manned and unmanned. The creation of a global UTM framework is dependent upon sustained collaboration among stakeholders like yourselves and throughout the international community. Those of us gathered here today will help lay that groundwork, but it's just the beginning. Our efforts this week will help pave the way for the automated, real-time airspace management that will ensure the success of UAS technology moving forward and safely integrate UAS into the U.S. and international airspace. And integration is nowhere near where we are today. That's still a somewhat distant goal. Today we're looking at accommodation. We want to get to true integration. By coming together here today, we've demonstrated a shared global commitment to safe and responsible flight. While a shared framework for UTM is a critical component to ensuring the continued safety of the skies, the global community can also take other steps to help ensure safety. AUVSI recently unveiled 5 new initiatives to help promote safe and responsible operations among our membership. These initiatives include increased advocacy around safety, as well as safety awards and credit programs, a partner-approved accreditation certification program for commercial operators, and a collaborative information portal that will allow our members to share their experiences to help make the skies safer for all. We also recently announced a collaboration with the National Council of Public Safety, UAS, to create education programs and informational materials to help facilitate the widespread adoption of UAS among first responders. Pardon me. As recent natural disasters have shown, UAS provide critical situational awareness to first responders and properly trained public safety officials, which can mean the difference between life and death in emergency situations. I also would like to stress the fact that our first responders and our public safety people in general can be one of the most high leverage partners we can have. Indeed, as for the regulators that raised your hands, you all know that resources are very, very scarce. The more public safety people we have actually utilizing the technology, the more they will recognize the difference between a safe and an unsafe operation and help us to police that community. In addition to exploring the concept of a global UAS registry for all users, exploring the concept of a global UAS registry for all users might help create a culture of safety that transcends borders. Registration helps promote accountability and responsibility among operators, and a shared database could provide authorities with critical information no matter where an operator is flying. And AUVSI also believes that safety education is critical as more people than ever are flying for the first time. That's why we launched the Know Before You Fly campaign in 2014 alongside the FAA and the Academy for Model Aeronautics. Know Before You Fly distributes safety information to new flyers in the product packaging of manufacturers such as DJI and the point of sale for such retailers as Amazon. Although Know Before You Fly is currently a U.S.-focused effort, similar initiatives can help promote safe flying in other countries as well, and we're more than happy to share that information around the world. The global UAS industry is on the brink of tremendous opportunity, but we will only harness our full potential if we can demonstrate that we can do it safely. In the United States alone, the UAS industry stands to create more than 100,000 jobs and over $82 billion in economic impact. I don't doubt that these numbers could go even higher under the right regulatory framework. A worldwide framework that harmonizes regulations would ensure safe and responsible operations, allowing the entire global market to tap into the benefits that UAS stand to offer. Finally, I'd like to personally extend an invitation to each of you to attend next year's Exponential Convention in Denver, Colorado. You can bring your cowboy boots for that. ICAO's announcement of a global UTM request for information at Exponential 2017 was the spark that will drive the discussions taking place over the next 2 days. Exponential 2018 in Denver this April will again gather professionals and policymakers from around the world who seek to take UAS higher and farther than ever before. About 8,000 people from more than 55 countries around the world, including Canada, attended Exponential 2017, offering the chance for a truly international conversation about the future of unmanned systems industry, and I hope you can join us. Thank you again for inviting me today. Thank you for all your efforts this week and into the future. I look forward to partnering with all of you.
Thank you, Brian. And I think one of the points that Brian raised was the value, the increasing value for emergency services, public services, and we really have seen that in the aftermath of the recent disasters, both hurricanes, earthquakes, flooding. And I think that that really brings home the point that in places where aviation has not necessarily traditionally been an asset, it has UAS has the opportunity to actually become much more valuable in other parts of the world where other types of aviation do not represent a limit. And because of that, our next speaker is working on some issues, I think, in Africa, and he'll be talking about that. Mr. Timothy Reuter is the head of the Civil Drones Unit in the World Economic Forum. He worked with Google on Project Wing and on Google's drone delivery program prior to this, and he's also the founder of a global UAV community, the Drone User Group Network. I think I've logged onto your website trying to find the rules. Before getting involved with UAV technology, he worked for the U.S. government at the State Department and the U.S. Agency for International Development. So I'm looking forward to hearing his perspective on the value for the UAS industry in global operations. Timothy?
Well, thank you very much, Steve, for that kind introduction, and to Dr. Liu for inviting us to be part of this. Since the World Economic Forum isn't a traditional player in the aviation community, I just want to take a moment to tell you a little bit about who we are, then transition to what we're doing in the drone space, and then finally end with a call to action for all of our communities. The World Economic Forum is the international organization for public-private cooperation and is probably best known for the event it puts on every year, bringing together business and public sector leaders in Davos, Switzerland. Over the past years, our focus has moved from facilitating interaction to driving impact. And as part of that transition, we recently opened the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution in San Francisco to focus on how we can accelerate the adoption of emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, precision medicine, and drones, and do so in such a way that maximizes the benefits of these technologies and mitigates the risks. We are looking into questions of how does society adapt to technology that is changing at a pace never seen before in human history? How does policymaking adapt to this new pace of change and become an enabling element of technological adoption rather than a lagging indicator? In many ways, the recent history of civilian drones is the perfect example of these challenges. Over the past decade, we have seen a revolution in the democratization of aviation. At first, it was two cultures interacting that didn't really understand each other. On one side was a new breed of innovators that often didn't know about aviation safety. On the other side were people with decades of flying experience, many of whom didn't see the benefit of having new participants in the airspace using rapidly evolving technology. But we've now arrived at a moment where we see a common understanding emerging between most of the players in this space. One of the most concrete examples of this has been in the response to Hurricane Harvey and the earthquake in Mexico, where we are seeing teams of drone operators being deployed to help assist those in need and assess disaster-affected areas to determine where relief resources should be deployed. Unlike previous disaster responses, such as Typhoon Haiyan in 2014 and the 2015 earthquake in Nepal, where some operators flew in like cowboys, interfered with ongoing operations, and collected aerial imagery that sat unused on thumb drives, today's drone pilots know that they have to follow the guidance of civil aviation authorities and disaster management agencies. And those agencies, in turn, know that they can use drones to provide a quicker response in a more cost-effective manner. And that's why we are seeing humanitarian organizations like UNICEF embrace these technologies. In the case of UNICEF, they're opening a humanitarian drone corridor in cooperation with the government of Malawi. And the World Food Programme is partnering with the Belgian government and the NGO We Robotics to develop coordination mechanisms around the use of drones in disasters. But the revolution that we've seen so far is just the very tip of the iceberg. Current applications around aerial data capture are about to be augmented by highly automated systems that can transform our logistics networks with delivery of goods, and farther into the future, automated eVTOL systems will be able to take us out of gridlock on our roads by transporting people in the sky within and between cities. So the question becomes, how do we create a policy architecture and infrastructure that supports all of these emerging use cases, along with manned general aviation? How do we create a scalable system that is able to go from tens of thousands of flights at any one time to one that supports millions of flying things at the air at any given moment? And lastly, how do we design systems that reflect our shared values of social inclusion and environmental responsibility? At the forum, we believe the future is not determined by technology, but by the design choices that we all make as a community of innovators, policymakers, and citizens. The forum is seeking to address these issues by partnering with forward-thinking governments at the national, state, provincial, and city levels, and industry to deploy scalable pilots that push the frontiers of this space and can serve as demonstrations of what is possible. We are creating a community of practice where governments and companies pushing the boundaries of drone delivery, human transportation, and aerial data capture can all learn from each other and generate knowledge that can serve as a resource for others looking to leverage these technologies. And we are seeking to leverage best practices from industry and forums like ICAO as part of that process. 2 weeks ago, I joined a team from the forum that traveled down to Rwanda to learn more about drone operations in this emerging economy that has become the first country on the planet to have national-scale drone delivery. We spoke with doctors about the 1,000 patients whose lives have been positively impacted by aerial delivery of blood supplies to remote rural clinics, including women who would have otherwise bled to death during childbirth, and how wastage and spoiling of donated blood has been reduced from 6% of the total supply down to 0. We also learned that the number of unmanned flights in Rwandan airspace is projected to exceed manned flights in the next year. This may be the first country in the world to cross that threshold. What we saw in Rwanda is a terrific example of how any country has the potential to become a leader in drone deployment through smart, creative policy choices. And Rwanda is looking for partners to help them become a proving ground in Africa for drones and other emerging technologies. Now, I want to end my comments with a call to action. If we believe that drone technology has the power to save lives, to lift us out of gridlock on our roads, to assist us in better understanding our environment, and to help government and businesses make better decisions, then we have a moral obligation to facilitate the adoption of this technology as soon as possible, while always keeping in mind the requirements of safety and the protection of people's privacy. I know this is what everyone has come here today to do, and I want to thank you for inviting the forum to be part of this conversation. Thank you all.
All right, thank you, Timothy. I don't think I could have, I can't even do anything with that, except to say that I was going to be kind of provocative and say, well, you know, is this real? But clearly it is. About 15 years ago, many of us were looking at the idea of ultralight jets, microjets. And there were articles in the aviation press about how they were going to darken the skies. It was going to change aviation forever. And of course, that didn't happen. But it didn't happen because we approached them the same way we approached all the other aircraft. They had really high tolerance requirements for certification, for pilot training, plus the price point was out of consideration for a large part of the people who were actually very enthused about using them. And I think that's the difference with UAS and with drones, is that the price point is actually very attractive for what people are trying to do. But I want to pose one question of my own to the three of you, and then perhaps you'll have your own question you'd like to pose to each other, and then we'll open to the floor to the audience. We've got about 10, 15 minutes before we have to turn the stage over to the next program. So my question: do we have a clear understanding of what it takes to use the airspace? Is it a right or is it a privilege?
Thank you, Steve. I think we have a good understanding, but from the traditional perspective. My point is that we need to really think outside of the box now and think about what other perspective and approaches we may have. From the traditional perspective, I think we have a clear understanding of how to use the airspace, but this is an opportunity, and an opportunity that really, we don't have this type of opportunities every Monday, you know? So I believe that this is a challenge, and this is at the same time the big opportunity we have.
Sure, I think that's a great question. And, you know, in some ways, there's a growing understanding that airspace is another kind of public commons like roads. And we're seeing some of these same discussions come around about roads and sharing the roads with automated systems. And to some degree, this is the next frontier that nobody has figured out, is how do we bring highly automated systems into our public commons, and, you know, dare I use the word autonomous systems into those public commons. And as we see, you know, an exponential increase in density of use, I think we may transition to a moment where we really need those kinds of highly automated systems in order to allow anybody to still be able to safely manage them. And that's part of the challenge of UTM and the conceptual challenge that regulators face.
Yeah, I forget who said it first, but, you know, probably somebody here in the audience, so raise your hand. Yeah, we're still trying to figure out how to integrate manned aircraft into the airspace. So I see this as something that is, you know, at once needing to parallel and eventually merge into that discussion. And I'm always asking the question to our U.S. regulators, what's the parallel between UTM and next gen? And I think increasingly we're starting to hear people discuss that, you know, in an evolutionary concept, we will start to scale things on the unmanned side that can then be utilized in manned aircraft, et cetera. So I think this is just a more accelerated version of what's been going on, and I think it's also important to recognize that we have capacity issues, we have congestion issues on the ground that we can alleviate in the sky. And I'm glad, Timothy, you're talking about automated vehicles as well, because we work across those domains in AUVSI, including the maritime domain. And I think we can, it turns out there's more things to hit down here. All right, so I think, you know, if we can figure out how to make cars order themselves, imagine a world where we don't have traffic lights, and that's a world that we're moving toward at some point. Cars just order themselves. I think we can learn how to do that in the skies. I'm glad you asked the question, and I'm always, you know, as a 25-year member of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, and a believer in my freedom to fly, right, my right to fly, the truth is that when we certificate pilots, we talk about privileges. And we don't want those privileges curtailed in any way by safety violations or pilot deviations or things that occur that make things more complicated. So the truth of the matter is, I think it is a privilege to use the airspace. I think it is common. It is a common good that we need to take responsibility for. And as a community, I think we have been doing our best to try and merge together these wonderful technological achievements and acceleration into the world of aviation. And I think so far, I think we've had good effect, and I hope, although we don't take anything for granted, I think we'll continue to move that in the right direction.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Okay, thank you, Brian. That's exactly, I'm booting. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Because I think it is a privilege to fly, no matter what the vehicle is. And that privilege comes with responsibilities, and that's what we're all here to work through. So now I'd like to open to the floor. You all have microphones in front of you. If you have an interest in posing a question to the panel, you can raise your hand, and then I'll find you, and then you'll be asked to select the button in front of you to take the microphone. So I see my first intervention right down here, sir. Go ahead. You're the one.
Yeah, hello? Okay, it's working now. It's still morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Rashid Musro. I work for a major helicopter company, international one that operates in Africa and Nigeria. And I also work with the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority to develop, regulations on drones at the moment. And also, I also do some research on UAS. I want the panel and those of us head up there to probably identify some of the, major research or topic areas that can help to make this industry safer. They say identifying the problem is part of the solution. So we know it's a long process. It's a lot of things we need to put in place. But if we identify the main areas that we need to research on, people would recommend solutions to them. So if you could identify the major things that we need to work on to make this safer, it would be excellent.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is, do you have a specific thought in your own mind about what the first things we need to tackle are? Or what you consider maybe one or two priorities you'd like to hear about during the symposium? Anybody want to pose that?
Thank you. If I'm to say only one, awareness is the first one. Awareness is at the beginning the most important thing we need, I believe.
Well, detect and avoid. Just let's pick an easy one. There are lots of different things that that don't have to be invented any particular place, that can be utilized in a lot of different places. And I think that's the power of this kind of a gathering and calls to action are really important. What are the specific things that we need to do that enable the other things? And I picked detect and avoid because, like I said, we've got a lot of things to hit down here on the ground. It doesn't have to be people from the aviation industry that solve this issue, right? But it needs to be baked into a system of systems. So how do we get that right? I think, I'm picking on detect and avoid because, that clearly is going to be one of the knottier things that we're going to have to address. But from my perspective, I look at some of the challenges where we are today, and I know it's not just in the United States. I know there are other places where there are not only the concerns of the traditional aviation industry, but you've got people looking from, municipal authorities looking from the sidewalk up, saying, "Gee, my entire city is now potentially being turned into an airport," as someone quoted Mayor Lee from San Francisco saying during a DAC meeting, and he's right. That's a concern, and the question becomes, how do we address that concern? How do we allow for municipal authorities to do their job in managing a city, which is a very, very challenging job to begin with, and I think that is where we have to collaborate with one another. But efforts, for example, to say, all right, under 200 feet, cities do whatever you want. I think that flies in the face of, that's almost too facile, and it kind of sweeps under the rug what we know has to be so in aviation, and the Secretary General tagged up on it when she used the word interoperability. Whatever's happening below 200 feet has to be interoperable with what's happening above 200 feet. Similar to large aircraft that are going to be flying in the flight levels, unmanned systems are going to have to transition all the airspace up to the flight levels. So this entire effort has got to be interoperable. ConOps, I think, are extremely important. Sharing our ideas on how to do that and learning from folks that are doing it, like in Africa, that are flying more unmanned, beyond visual line of sight operations than manned aircraft soon. This is a marvelous thing. How do we learn from that, and how do we collaborate with one another to move down the road faster? But make no mistake about it, bringing together the technical chops that are needed to solve challenges like detect and avoid will not only be the key turning in the lock for unmanned aircraft, but I know I'm going to want that on my aircraft as well.
I actually just want to add one thing to build on what you said. You know, one of the things we're thinking about a lot at the forum is how do we go from segregation, which is really the starting point, to integration of all of these forms of traffic. And I think it's important for us to understand what the scale of the opportunity here is, because, you know, in some ways it's great to have these estimates of, you know, $82 billion in economic impact, but I actually think if you include all the opportunities in drone delivery and eventually in human transportation inside of cities, that may be a dramatic undercount. And as we, you know, get a better handle on, is airspace sort of the new general infrastructure for logistics and mobility, that's going to help us decide what is the level of investment we need to make and how quickly do we need to make those investments to help solve these kinds of safety and other challenges.
Okay. So what I'm hearing, it's kind of an interesting point that I'd like to challenge the regulators with, and that is the ICAO system is designed so that any citizen in the world can buy an airplane ticket and essentially fly around the globe and know that they have a certain level of protection by participating in the system at the airport, in the airspace, when they arrive in the city where they go, and that the safety net is structured similarly. So one of the challenges I think we're going to be posed with is, should I have a city that wants to innovate and go into a really forward-leaning and progressive use of drones or unmanned aircraft, how do I know that they have, if I'm flying to their city for a business meeting and I'm coming downtown and one of these things comes whistling over my head to deliver the packages, how do I know that that city or that local environment has actually employed the effective risk mitigations that keep me safe as a public participant in that environment?
I mean, I think this is why everyone has been talking about moving to risk-based and performance-based regulatory frameworks. But no one has figured out precisely how to implement that. And that's really why the World Economic Forum is trying to take an approach related to scalable pilots, so we can get multiple examples going that other people can refer to meet that challenge. But I think, as you say, that there do need to be some standards, hopefully around risk and performance, that address those issues.
Okay, one more challenge. So, detect and avoid. Does it need to be just as good as see and avoid?
Oh, I'm going to pass it to the real pilot over here. But honestly, see and avoid. I mean, raise your hand if you see everything that, even the traffic that's called. It's hard to see everything that's out there, right? It needs to be better than see and avoid. Okay. And I think it can be. I can't wait for it to be.
So if we need to make it better than see and avoid, Gilberto, how am I going to integrate that into your operations?
Technology. I don't see any other solution. Technology is the answer for that. And let me get to the other challenge, Steve. When you were talking about, the examples of, will that be possible that some cities will implement some different ideas? That is going to happen. I don't have any doubt about it. It's whether I like it or not, I'm not really happy about that idea, but I believe that is going to happen, and this is why the traditional way of thinking about the safety net is maybe not going to work this way on this occasion. So that is going to happen, and this is why this challenge is incredible, bigger than whatever we have seen before. I believe that.
Okay, gentlemen, anything else that this conversation has sparked for you that you'd like to close with, because we are now concluding our time?
Just to thank everybody. I'm really happy and surprised to see how many new entrants are here in this meeting. One of the important and difficult things we have in this drone issue is that we have thousands or maybe millions of interested parties that respectfully, of course, know nothing about aviation or very little about aviation. So the fact that they are here today is bringing us new hope that this thing is being taken seriously from the drone community, and that we are all understanding that we have to share the responsibility of building a new aviation for the next 100 years.
And it just bears mentioning that this is, unmanned systems are capturing the imagination of aviators of the future. Not long ago, I was at Sun and Fun and walking down the flight line as these beautiful old warbirds were flying along runway heading. And I got to the Embry-Riddle booth, and they had a drone cage outside. And there were kids of all ages, I'll say it that way, with their backs to the flight line, watching somebody fly an obstacle course inside that drone cage. This is how we are going to rejuvenate at the younger levels the future pilots, whether they be remote or manned pilots, the future engineers, the future systems designers, the future mechanics that need to work on the aircraft. So this is going to be an extremely important effort, and we need to be as broad in our thinking as we possibly can be.
Thank you. Timothy?
Sure. I would just say this conversation has highlighted to me that what we're trying to do here is something that's never been done before, which is why it's exciting, and that it's going to take all of the creativity of everyone in this room and beyond to define answers to these challenges.
Hear, hear. All right, gentlemen, I want to thank you all, and ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking the panel for a really inspiring start. There's a commercial in the United States about a car, and it says, you know, essentially, this isn't your father's car. You know, when they're talking about the new modern car. Folks, this is not your father's ICAO. So you're here on a Friday and a Saturday. This is already extraordinary. But what that represents is an opportunity to have this conversation in a different way. We have a lot of our traditional participants here who are excited about engaging with the industry. Let's roll up our sleeves and have a really great couple of days. We're looking forward to the outcomes of what we hear here, and we thank you all for the start. So let's get started. Leslie? Brian, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
You? Oh, in front. In front.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, Leslie. Take it away.
All right, once again, thank you very much. That was a wonderful way to get this all started. So, as they're getting themselves rearranged, I want to do a couple further little housekeeping items and then get into a presentation. So, during today and tomorrow, for those of you that were not here for the last 3 days for the RPAS Symposium, we do have a couple new and different things that we are doing with this symposium, one of which is we are live streaming and live blogging. So welcome as well to those people that are watching this online. That's something that we're not used to doing here. We also have set up so that during the panel discussions coming up today and tomorrow, you will be able to submit questions via email to the moderator so that the moderator can scroll through, and if there are really good ones amongst the whole collection, and really try and target those that will bring out the best responses or the best challenges to the speakers. So we have the email address plenary@icao.int, We will show that several times, but if you make note of that now, you'll be able to use it later. We also have an app that you can download, iPhone, Android, or other web application, UAS 2017. So if you download that app, you'll be able to get all the information about the symposium, the speakers. Eventually, all the presentations will be uploaded after they have been presented to you in here. They will be uploaded onto the app. And you can do all sorts of social media exchange through the app as well. So with that, let's go on to the other. So during the RPAS symposium, I talked to you a bit about what we were doing with all of the, yeah, that's right. It's time for slides. What we were doing on the RPAS side. And I mentioned that we have this other stream of work for everything that's not part of the RPAS stream of work. And this event here is all targeted at that other bucket of information. Maybe. Yeah, it's not working. It's not connecting. If you want to just, or just advance the slide for me. So technology does not always work according to plan. So now we're at drone enable. And still, we're not quite connecting. You know what? Yeah. Yes, go ahead and click. So the objective of this event is to define a UAS traffic management framework. We put this request out to industry, to states, to academia. Anybody and everybody had an opportunity to weigh in and submit proposals on what should UAS traffic management look like in terms of the framework. And that has to take into consideration the effectiveness of the framework, how it can function, the safety and efficiency of it. So we were looking for the core boundaries. What are the things that any UAS traffic management system around the world needs to contain, both in terms of a local operation, but also in order to facilitate interoperability between UAS systems. So the first thing we came up with was, well, we cannot do this the traditional way. So as Steve said, you're here on a Friday and a Saturday. This is not tradition. So we're doing this a whole lot faster. We are skipping over the multiple years of development work that we traditionally have in developing SARPs and PANs. And we're involving industry from the very beginning. That's why we went out publicly to say, we want your submissions into this event. Right from the beginning there. So we did it. We went to Exponential back in May in Dallas. We announced there at the same time that we were sending out a state letter, which is our traditional process. And here we are. We formed a group. We have a UAS advisory group. You've already heard some mention of that. And if I may, please actually have the members of the UAS advisory group that are present stand up. These are the people that you have to thank for this event being pulled together. They have spent a huge amount of time and effort, blood, sweat, and tears, I believe, have gone into this, with all the work that we put on them to make this happen. Under the leadership of Doug Davis and the Secretariat, Cliff Sweet. So we formed that group. They have undertaken a huge amount. So they were asked to develop guidance material that we could put forward for state use as well as anybody from industry. And that's what they've been working on. It's a multidisciplinary group, as was mentioned by the Secretary General. It has state representatives, it has industry, it has manufacturers and operators.
Welcome to ICAO's Unmanned Aircraft Systems, or UAS Toolkit. UAS represent one of the fastest growing technologies in the world. Their designs and operations are challenging states to safely and efficiently integrate UAS into airspace shared with a highly regulated and well-established manned aircraft industry. UAS may fly near aerodromes, controlled airspace, densely populated areas, or near sensitive sites, each of which requires carefully considered regulations. Our virtual UAS toolkit is being offered to regulators as a starting point when establishing regulations and guidance for domestic operations by presenting global best practices, lessons learned, and regulations. Whether used as toys or as professional platforms, unmanned aircraft, or UA, can be flown in a variety of configurations using payloads and sensors that best serve their missions. The economics benefits are immense and obvious to all, while the societal benefits include humanitarian efforts, search and rescue, firefighting, infrastructure and crop monitoring, and research and development. UAS operators and remote pilots may be new to aviation and can benefit from the information contained in the toolkit. Developing UAS regulations that consider public and aviation safety first, along with security and privacy protection while promoting industry, is an achievable mission.
So yes, technology sometimes catches us by surprise. But we put together a toolkit, as you just saw. I thought I had a moment to introduce it first. So the first deliverable from the advisory group is the toolkit. The toolkit has a great deal of information. I urge everybody to go have a look at it, and you can connect to it directly from the app. So for this event, the Drone Enable, we put out the request for information. We did that in May with a deadline in July to get all the submissions. The advisory group had to review all 76 proposals. Each of those had a tremendous amount of information. They were restricted to 2,000 words, but those 2,000 words were not easy to necessarily digest, analyze, and then evaluate. But the team did a remarkable job. They pulled it all off. They spent hours and hours. We had many complaints from all over the advisory group. So we know how challenging that request of us, or request of them from us, really was. But the global response with those submissions and the work of the advisory group, excellent. Now, they reviewed each of the proposals in terms of how well does it address the request that we put out. Does it appear to be realistic? How mature is it? Is it something that can be made use of around the world, or is this going to be a very local applicability? What is the technology that is needed to support it? So there were a lot of questions to be asked and answered on every one of the submissions. They looked at the registration, identification, and tracking responses, communication systems, geofencing-like systems. Now, in many of the cases, the proposals covered all of the topics, and they covered them very well. Others covered some aspects very well. So we had a lot to choose from in terms of being able to say, okay, if you all did the entire process really well, we can consider you in the UTM framework sessions that we will hear from today. Tomorrow, we have the 3 different streams. And just to show a bit of an image of, this is the survey that every one of the advisory group members had to complete on every single one of those 76 papers. There was a lot of information. Go ahead. Yep. So at this point, we have, I'm not sure, Cliff, exactly how many presenters from different companies and states?
We have 7 in the plenary and 24 in the streams.
Okay, so 7 presenters in the UTM stream that you'll be hearing from today. Tomorrow, 24 different presenters. So this will really be fascinating. And what we intend to do is bring all of this information together. The advisory group is going to be meeting next week, and then they'll be doing a lot of follow-up work, mostly via distance, telecons, and email. But we will be presenting the outcomes from the deliberations today and tomorrow at our GANIS and SANIS, actually at the GANIS symposium that'll be held in the middle of December. So all of the outcomes will be made public. The outcomes will really be in the form of guidance material. That guidance material will be put online associated with the UAS toolkit. So everybody will have access to it. And with that, I welcome everybody to a coffee break. Go get a bit of movement so we can come back in, and we will turn immediately to the discussion on UTM. Thank you, everyone.